Tatiana wandered down the deserted street. Night had already fallen on the city, the lamps piercingly bright. It seemed as if they shone right into the soul, screaming to the unfortunate girl, "Run away from here, run." But where could she run to? Nowhere. Completely alone in a strange city, without means of subsistence, without a roof over her head, and with a child under her heart. Did Tatiana ever think that this is how everything in her life would turn out, when just 7 months ago everything was different and it seemed only a happy life lay ahead? Back then, Tatiana lived in the village. She did not go to the city to study after school. She could have even enrolled in a university on a budget. But she was raised by a single mother who worked as a milkmaid on the local farm. Her mother could not have afforded a city life. No, she offered, said she would manage, cope, but Tatiana decided to stay in the village, went to work, and then a young engineer came to their village. New equipment for milking was being installed at the local farm, and Andrew came as if for training. He lived in the village for about a month, got to know Tatiana. And the young engineer fell in love with the young postwoman, and she reciprocated. Everything spun so fast between them, and both believed it was love at first sight. When Andrew proposed to Tatiana before leaving, she hesitated, but when he asked her to marry him, she had no doubts and went with him. She would now become a city dweller, and it didn't matter that she and Andrew knew each other for so little. For true love, are there any conditions? Tatiana's mother had doubts, tried to dissuade her daughter, but did she listen? She was of age, knew everything herself. Tatiana left with Andrew. In the city, Andrew introduced Tatiana to his mother, but she did not like the village bride. Not the kind of wife Mrs. Anna wanted for her only son. Andrew was educated, promising, and what was this? A village bumpkin. But Andrew did not listen to his mother. He sincerely loved this young, sweet girl with huge blue eyes and a braid as thick as a fist. Tatiana was great, cooked deliciously, skillfully kept the house in order. What more could one want in a wife? Andrew and Tatiana got married. There was no wedding, he just gave her a ring, a huge bouquet of roses, and they sat in a cafe together. Tatiana's mother congratulated them over the phone, and that was all. Mrs. Anna didn't even think to congratulate the newlyweds. The young couple lived in an apartment that Andrew had inherited from his grandmother, although the documents were still in his mother's name. He wanted to immediately register his young wife in the apartment, but Mrs. Anna opposed, so Andrew decided not to argue. It's all right, the mother will calm down and accept Tatiana. Soon Tatiana became pregnant, registered for maternity care. She wanted to find a job somewhere, but Andrew was against it. He earned decently at his company, could support the family himself, and why should she, pregnant, go anywhere? What job could she get, as a salesperson or a cleaner? No. His wife deserved more. After the baby was born, she could even go to university. In short, Andrew loved Tatiana with all his heart, cherished and pampered her, and she could not get enough of him. That day, nothing foretold trouble. Tatiana saw her husband off to work in the morning, busied herself with household chores, and after lunch, she needed to go to the clinic. She was going to take public transport to the doctor. But then Andrew called. "Sunshine, I can get off work early today, let me drive you to the clinic. Why should you shake in a stuffy bus? It's hard for you," the husband offered. Tatiana gladly agreed. She liked it when Andrew drove her to the doctor, she generally liked it when they were together. She began to get ready to wait for her husband, but an hour passed, too, and the appointment was in half an hour, but Andrew was still not there. Tatiana called him on his mobile, and a traffic police officer answered. He reported that a drunk driver had cut off her husband's car. "Is he alive?" "Is he?" Tatiana asked, in horror. "Unfortunately, the car skidded, it crashed into the barrier, your husband sustained injuries incompatible with life." "My condolences." Tatiana could not believe it was true, grief stunned her. She only came to her senses at the funeral, when her husband's coffin was being lowered into the ground. And then she screamed, went into hysterics. People around her tried to calm her down as best they could. Only Andrew's mother didn't even approach Tatiana. Aged in an instant, she stood like stone at her son's grave, and as she left the cemetery, she threw Tatiana a look. "It's all because of you, you wretch." She knew that Andrew was heading to his wife, to take her to the hospital. Tatiana herself, not Ivanovna, had told her that. And now the mother blamed Tatiana for the death of her son. He wouldn't have been in a hurry to her. Nothing would have happened. At the memorial service, the mother-in-law only glared maliciously at her daughter-in-law, and a day after the funeral, she came to Tatiana and told her to get out of her apartment. "Where am I supposed to go?" Tatiana cried. "I have no other housing. I am registered at the clinic here." "I don't care, just don't let me see you here. You're living here illegally, I didn't register you. Get out, go back to your village." "But I'm carrying your grandchild," Tatiana timidly noted. "That's yet to be seen," the mother-in-law sneered. "You could have deceived my Andrew, but not me. Who knows who you've been with in your village?" "Mrs. Anna, how can you?" Tatiana cried out of hurt and all the experiences. "You know that I got pregnant only after the wedding. So, the shameless one was putting horns on my son after all." "Get out with your bastard," the mother-in-law screamed. And then she became like a madwoman. Threatening, she attacked Tatiana, threw her belongings around. In the end, she simply kicked her daughter-in-law out to the stairwell without her belongings, only throwing Tatiana's purse in her face. And it didn't even have a wallet in it. Tatiana herself had laid it on the nightstand for some reason, and there it remained. Luckily, her passport was in the purse. Tatiana didn't leave for some time, crying on the stairwell, begging Mrs. Anna to let her in, then asked for money. At least for a ticket to the village. Dead silence came from behind the door, and all the neighbors around fell silent. Nobody helped Tatiana, much less stood up for her. Tatiana left, headed to the station, hoping to somehow try to leave. At first, she begged the conductors to let her on the train illegally, but they only shrugged, saying it wasn't allowed. Yes, if she had money, everything would have been different, but in her purse, she scraped together very little. With that money, she bought a pie and water, sat on a bench in the park, and ate it all greedily. She needed to do something, she needed somewhere to sleep. The baby under her heart, as if sensing the mother's worries, behaved anxiously, jumped, kicked. Tatiana decided to go to the police. It was already late evening. A sleepy duty officer listened to her, said that the local officer would be there tomorrow morning. Let Tatiana come tomorrow, but what should she do now? The duty officer just shrugged. Tatiana spent her first homeless night in the park, falling asleep on a bench. Fortunately, the night was warm, as if nature itself cared for the unfortunate girl. In the morning, a plump janitor who was sweeping in the park woke her up. "Why are you sprawled out here?" the plump woman shouted. "Drug addicts have become completely shameless. Oh, even with a belly. Have no fear of God or devil. Don't think about yourself. Think about the child. Ah, what am I saying, brains long gone to drugs." Tatiana wanted to explain to the woman that she was mistaken, she wasn't a drug addict, she just had nowhere to go, but the janitor only shouted, and then even swung a broom at her. Tatiana hurriedly left the park. But where to go? And then she saw an old man by the store, standing with his hand outstretched. In the head of the unfortunate and pregnant woman, a plan immediately formed, to try begging for alms. She mainly needed to collect a little over 1,000 for a ticket home. She stood not far from the old man and also stretched out her hand. The old homeless man, seeing this, changed his expression. He left his post, approached Tatiana closely, and hissed foully, "Now get lost, mare, or you'll end up giving birth to your brat right here." Tatiana recoiled in fear from him and left, heading back to the station. Tatiana thought it would be easier to collect money there. She stood not far from the station square, stretched out her hand, and then immediately lowered it, terribly ashamed. And then a homeless woman, a woman of indeterminate age, noticed her. She approached, smiling, and advised not to tempt fate. Every meter here is divided, they won't let newcomers in, she said. Go on, girl, get away while you're intact. I just need a little, only for a ticket home, Tatiana pleaded. May I stand? It's none of my business, stand all you want, but if the crook sees, he'll sick his dogs on you. Dogs? Tatiana whispered in horror. Well, yes, the squint. Grigory, he's the boss here. He lost an eye in a fight, that's why he's called the squint. He's formed a team from people like us, you and me. All the beggars ask for his permission to work around the station, and they pay him. Maybe I should ask him too, Tatiana asked in desperation. Oh, I wouldn't advise it. He'll tear you apart, and you're pregnant, get out of here. I have nowhere to go, Tatiana cried. Oh, what a situation, come on, let me give you some tea. My name's Svetlana, by the way. I'm no Mother Teresa, but I feel sorry for you. The new acquaintance led Tatiana under a bridge. There, in the bushes, was a shack where Svetlana apparently lived. She quickly made a small fire, heated water in a sooty kettle, and poured boiling water into a grimy mug. From a worn-out bag, she took out an unopened loaf of sausage and bread. She sliced everything on some unclear board, made sandwiches, and handed one to Tatiana. Eat. Initially, Tatiana, watching the homeless woman's actions, felt disgust, but the sausage smelled so delicious. The girl bit into the sandwich eagerly. Delicious, she smiled timidly. Of course, Svetlana smiled back, chewing on another sandwich. I know where to get food. I don't eat just anything. You know a good store? Tatiana naively asked, washing down the sandwich with hot water. Store, Svetlana chuckled. We have our own shop. Alright, I'll tell you a secret, because I feel sorry for you. There's a supermarket around the corner, they have a dumpster behind it. The employees throw out expired products there several times a week after 10 in the evening and in the morning until 8. The main thing is to get there early, or else there's only rot left. Svetlana winked at Tatiana, made a couple more sandwiches, and shared with her new acquaintance. Don't worry, friend, you'll get used to it, we all started sometime. Svetlana sighed. It's just bad that you're pregnant. Well, okay, you'll give birth, I'll help you get rid of it. Get rid of what? Tatiana whispered in horror. Well, what? Your baby, you won't survive in our conditions with it. And anyway, you'll have to deal with the squint in any case. So, get used to the idea that you're one of us now, and you'll live by our rules. Alright, I have to go, and you should leave. Try asking for money in the park at the stops, but don't go to the square, they'll tear you apart. Come to sleep at my place, remember the way? Tatiana nodded uncertainly in response. No, she definitely wouldn't come back here. Thanks to Svetlana, of course. But Tatiana would not live like this. Afterward, she went back to the police station, but there was some commotion there, they were expecting high-ranking officials. Nobody wanted to talk to Tatiana, they told her to come back tomorrow. Where else could she go? Tatiana wandered around the city all day, terribly hungry. The only thing that somewhat dulled the hunger was unripe apples she found in the park. Evening came again. Tatiana walked through the emptying streets and cried. And the baby in her belly also seemed to cry, kicking, pushing. No strength left. And how she wanted to eat. Tatiana remembered Svetlana's words about the expired food. Maybe she could find something there now? Tatiana no longer felt disgust or shame. She just wanted to eat. She herself and the baby demanded it. She quickly found the supermarket, went around to the back, and saw the dumpster she needed. She approached and hesitated. There they were, dumpsters, just a couple of steps away, and the lamp lit up so conveniently, and nobody was around. Tatiana took a step forward and immediately heard the rustle of a plastic bag under her feet. She looked down and was stunned. At her feet, in a transparent bag, lay a bundle of $100 bills. Tatiana even shook her head, thinking she was hallucinating from hunger. No, it was no mirage. A pile of money lay at the feet of the unfortunate homeless woman. Tatiana looked around, then bent down and picked up the bag, carefully examining the bills. They seemed real. And a whole untouched bundle. Tatiana quickly stuffed the money into her pockets and hurried away, then covertly counted it in the park. The girl both laughed and cried at the same time. Could all her troubles really be behind her? There must be a God in this world after all. He had mercy on her. The first thing Tatiana did was go to the supermarket and buy a variety of food, then, sitting on a bench, she ate with pleasure. She wanted to sleep, and even more, to wash. No, today she would sleep in normal conditions, and tomorrow she would buy a ticket and go home to her mother, and everything would be all right for her. And for her little one too. "Don't worry, baby, we'll manage now," she whispered, heading to the hotel. At the hotel, she rented a single room for the day, washed up, ate some more, and fell into a deep sleep. Tatiana had never slept so soundly before. She dreamed of Andrew. He was saying something, smiling, but for some reason, he kept moving away from Tatiana, then disappeared altogether. Tatiana woke up feeling inexplicably anxious. Yes, she thought about whose money she had found, but at that moment, her primary concern was solving her own problems. After having breakfast in the hotel's restaurant, Tatiana went to the station. There, she bought a ticket, then visited a clothing store, and rested a bit more in her room. In the evening, Tatiana headed to the station, and just as she was near her train's carriage, a police squad approached her and asked her to come to the police station. "My train is leaving in 15 minutes, Tatiana pleaded. "We don't know about that," one of the policemen replied. "You're detained, we received a report about you." "For what am I detained?" Tatiana gasped. "For theft." "Let's go, we'll figure it out." At the police station they explained to Tatiana the accusation against her. The money she found was lost by a young man. He had accidentally dropped it, and when he realized, he reported to the police. He remembered approaching the dumpster to throw away trash from his car's trunk. The money was in his jacket pocket, and apparently, the bag they were in slipped out. A surveillance camera at the supermarket facing the dumpster captured footage. The police reviewed the video and saw a young, pregnant woman picking up the bag with money. They issued a bulletin and distributed it everywhere. Soon, they received a report that a similar-looking girl had rented a room in a hotel and bought a train ticket. Detaining Tatiana was now straightforward. "But I didn't steal the money," Tatiana cried. "I found it. That's visible on your recording. It's a significant amount of money. You were obliged to turn in the found items to the police. You didn't do that, so you're accused of theft," the policeman explained. She was taken to the station, and despite the late hour, both the local officer and the investigator were there. "What's going to happen to me now?" Tatiana cried. "I don't know," the investigator grimly replied, filling out the papers. "We'll open a case, then forward it to court. The court will decide. But I gave all the money to your officers, let them give it to the owner, and that's it," Tatiana pleaded. "I spent a little, I'll repay it later, just let me return to my mother." The victim filed a report, "We are obliged to process it." The investigator sighed and looked sympathetically at the slender, pregnant young woman, almost a girl. "I'd advise you to try to reach an agreement with the money's owner. To have him withdraw the complaint, then there won't be a criminal case." Then someone knocked on the office door, and a young man in an expensive suit entered. He was the one who lost the money. Tatiana looked at him and couldn't believe it. Was this the same Alexei? Alexei, who used to visit their village in the summer to stay with his grandmother. He was about 5 years older than Tatiana, sometimes took her fishing, and even gave her rides on his motorcycle. She had been secretly in love with him, but Alexei never paid her that kind of attention. Then he graduated from school, went on to further studies. He stopped visiting the village after his grandmother died. Tatiana's life moved on, seemingly forgetting her first love. And now he stood before her. Alexei looked at the tearful pregnant woman in surprise, realizing he had seen her somewhere. "Tatiana, is that you?" he uncertainly said. "It's me, Alexei," she sobbed. "What happened to you? Why are you here?" Alexei bombarded her with questions. The investigator explained that they had found the thief of his money. "What thief?" Alexei laughed. "I'm the fool here." He withdrew the complaint, and the issue was resolved. Then they left the station. Tatiana shared her bleak story with him. Alexei was furious, offering to deal with the mother-in-law, or at least scare her. "What, are you a gangster?" Tatiana asked, with a sad smile. "No, I'm a lawyer," Alexei laughed. "I can legally force that lady to give you the apartment. Not even to you, but to her future grandson. Nothing's needed." "I want to go home to my mom," Tatiana confessed. Alexei said he would take her to the village in his car. He explained how he lost his money. His father needed urgent surgery, everything had already been paid for, only a little more was needed. Alexei had just been paid in cash for a successful job. He was on his way to the ATM to transfer the required amount to the clinic's account, and he stopped by the garbage bins on the way. There had been a package from a hunt lying in the trunk for a long time, which he kept forgetting to throw away. And now, there were the bins right on his way. He decided to dispose of the trash. He threw away the package, but didn't notice he also lost another package with the money. "I discovered the loss at the ATM, so I went to the police. Who would have known it would turn out like this?" "Tatiana, please don't be mad at me," he said. "I didn't know. I never intended to steal. I was in such a bad state, you can't imagine. And then there was a pile of money. It didn't even occur to me that I should take it to the police." She also guiltily justified herself. "Alexei, I'm sorry, I spent some of it. Your dad still won't have enough for the operation. But I'll return it, I'll send it to you once I'm with my mom." "You don't need to send anything," Alexei shook his head. "I'll add it myself. But I feel uncomfortable." "Tatiana, please, forget it, everything's fine," he winked. Tatiana spent the night at Alexei's apartment, and in the morning, he drove her to the village. When her mother saw her daughter, she burst into tears. She hadn't even known what had happened to Tatiana. She was considering going to the police. She couldn't attend her son-in-law's funeral, and now her daughter's phone was out of reach. Only Mrs. Anna answered at the apartment, scolding her. "My dear daughter, don't cry, we'll manage," her mother said. "Now we're together, and everything will be fine for us." And on the eve of the new year, Tatiana gave birth to a healthy baby boy. But she didn't stay long in the village with her son. Alexei started visiting her more and more often, bringing toys, baby clothes, and eventually proposing to Tatiana. She agreed because, as it turned out, first love is the strongest. Tatiana returned to the city with her son. Alexei's parents welcomed her immediately and named the boy their grandson. Especially Alexei's father, Sergei, loved playing with little Nikita. After his surgery, he couldn't lift heavy things, so he would rock Nikita on his leg, and the boy would squeal with joy. Tatiana's mother also visited the city often, to see her daughter, son-in-law, grandson, and in-laws. They were all now a real family. And Anna lived out her days alone in her apartment on the other side of the city. She often thought that she must have a grandson somewhere, but where? No one would tell her anymore.